Day I was shopping with my dad and my sister at Walmart. It was the middle of the day, we were just getting groceries, and my sister and I were fighting about which type of cereal we should get. Honey Bunches of Oats, always. And all of a sudden, this lady comes up to us looking really scared. Her eyes are opened really wide and she's kind of shaking, looking really nervous. And she asks my dad if she can hide behind us. My dad doesn't really know what to do. He's caught off guard, so he says yes. Because it felt really serious, and even though we didn't know what was going on, our instinct was to protect this woman. She hides behind the corner of the cereal aisle, and we're just blocking the end of the aisle, and my dad and my sister and I are just looking at each other like, what's going on? And before we can say anything to each other, this man rounds the corner at the other end of the aisle, and he's walking really urgently and aggressively towards us. And he asks if we've seen a woman with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a blue t-shirt, which is exactly what the woman looks like. So we deny it. We say, no, we haven't seen this woman. We don't know who he's talking about. But then the woman pokes out from behind the aisle, and he sees her hiding behind us. And that's when things got crazy. So he sees the woman and starts to get really mad and is yelling at us to get out of his way. But we aren't moving. And he's shouting, "That's my wife, move." And the lady is looking really scared. So my dad takes out his phone and tries to call 911. And the man swats my dad's phone away as soon as he sees it, and it falls to the ground. So then my dad starts running to find someone in the store, either a security guard or an employee, to help. And when my dad moves, the man pushes me and my sister out of the way, grabs the woman, and starts dragging her out of the Walmart. But the whole time he's dragging her, he's making direct eye contact with me. Like, he's not even blinking, he's just staring at me. And then before he gets to the door, he whispers something in the lady's ear. And then all of a sudden, her body language changes completely. She doesn't look worried or scared anymore, she looks totally calm. And then she turns around and looks back at me one more time. So they're both staring at me, and then the woman kind of smirks. And then they leave the store. Then, a few days later, things get really weird. Okay, so part 3 of the Walmart story. So my dad rushes back to me and my sister to help, but when he gets there, the man and the woman have already left the Walmart. And I told my dad how the man whispered something in the woman's ear and she seemed to totally calm down and be completely fine. So my dad was like, okay, yeah, it sounds like there was some sort of domestic dispute, but they seem like they've resolved it and it's probably okay. But I still had this really eerie feeling, like I kept thinking of that woman's weird smirk, and it was just making me feel super unsettled. It gave me chills every time I thought of it. So a few days later, I had to go back to Walmart to pick up a few things, run some errands, and when I'm walking out, the blonde woman is standing there at the exit. And she looked at me and she started signaling something to me with her hands. Like, it looked like sign language, but to this day, I'm still not sure what she was trying to tell me or if it was sign language. And then I see the same man from a few days earlier coming up behind her. And he starts telling her to get into his car really aggressively. And again, the woman looks really upset like she did a few days ago. So then I look over to where his car is, the car he's pointing at. And it's a van, and I can see that there are like 10 other women in the back of that van. The man sees me looking at his van, and I don't think he wanted me to see it and see the other women in it, because he starts running towards his car and grabbing and dragging the woman along the way. And I start sprinting away because I can tell there's something really wrong with this situation. So I'm sprinting out of the parking lot, and I reach for my phone in my pocket, but I realize I had dropped it while I was running. I turn around and I can see it lying there on the pavement, but I also see the man coming towards me, now driving his van. But I figure I need my phone, so I sprint back and pick it up, but when I get there, the man has pulled up next to me in his van. And he says, "Here, I have some candy for you." Meanwhile, now the woman who was signaling something to me at the exit of the Walmart is now in the back of the van, and again, she's trying to signal something to me from the back. And I can't quite figure out what she's trying to tell me, but it looks like she's trying to tell me not to take the candy. But now the man's being more aggressive. He's like, "Come on, take it." So I start to get really scared and I take the candy. And I've called my dad like 3 times now and he hasn't picked up, but finally on the 4th time he picks up. And I tell him what's going on, that the man is following me in his van. So my dad hurries to where I am, and he's already called the police at this point, so they also show up, but by the time they all get there, the man has already left in his van. We tell the police what happened, and then a few days later we find out that the man in the van is actually a pimp and trafficking young women to much older men, which is why he had so many girls in the back of his van. And I still don't know what the woman was trying to signal to me from the back of the van, but I think she was trying to protect me and tell me to run away. Okay, so first of all, MEM, I'm not really sure what you go by, only know your TikTok handle, which I've tagged in the videos on TikTok, and I put in the description below if anyone wants to follow her. This is a crazy story, so thank you for sharing. I got, by the way, a ton of DMs with really awesome stories. Thank you for everyone who sent them to me. I'm still going through them. I've responded to some of you with some follow-up questions. Sorry if there's a delay in that response, but you guys sent some really crazy stories and some absurd stuff has happened to some of you. So I'm excited to keep doing story times and kind of debriefing the story now, which is what I want to do. I really liked this story because, first of all, it's a good story, but I also think it's a really important story. I think that like a lot of people don't know that human trafficking happens in the US. And like I remember when I first found out that it was like a common thing that happened in the United States, I was shocked. There needs to be more awareness of it. And I think young women are obviously particularly vulnerable to being victims of human trafficking. And I know I have a lot of young female followers, so I think it's good to just always be aware of your surroundings. And this actually, weirdly, is the second story this summer that I've heard of kind of a situation like this. The other story I heard this summer that reminded me of this one was my friend shared an Instagram post. So I don't personally know the person it happened to, and then I was trying to find the Instagram post this morning and I couldn't. But kind of like the gist of the story was this woman and her boyfriend were coming back from Lake Tahoe in California, and on the way back they stopped at a gas station because she had to pee. So she goes to the gas station, she's standing in line, and there was a woman behind her, and she noticed this woman was kind of staring at her, like she was just getting weird vibes. She just started to get really spooked. Like when I can't remember it perfectly, but when she went to the bathroom, the woman either followed her or like tried to get into the bathroom with her, and she obviously freaked out, and then I think ran back to her car, and on her way back to her car, she noticed that there was a man standing waiting out at the front of the store. And I'm not describing this super well, but long story short, this is a common thing that happens where a man and a woman team will team up, and basically what would happen in that situation is the woman would be standing in line waiting for kind of like the ideal victim to stand in the bathroom line as well, and then she would somehow sedate her, probably with like a syringe of some sort, and then she would go into the bathroom stall with the woman and then come out, and if anyone in the store was suspicious, she'd just be like, oh, my friend had a really big night of drinking. Meanwhile, this person just got drugged, and then, you know, abduct her, and it would be a classic case of human trafficking. Really, that was perhaps the worst storytelling I could have done, but it wasn't really a story. It's more just to say this happens. Another example of this, my friend was on a run one day. This guy was following her on a bike, and he kept trying to talk to her and say kind of like lewd things to her. And she kept being like, can you please leave me alone? Stop talking to me. At one point, it just kind of, she couldn't keep just ignoring it. This guy kept following her, and then this woman pulls up in a car next to her while she's still running, and the car looks super sketchy. It's like, has so much, like, it looks like it's the car of a hoarder. Like, it has a ton of shit in it. And the woman's like, I'm a police officer, and I know that this man is following you. You can get in my car, and I can protect you, get you out of harm's way. And my friend almost did it, because she was like, yeah, she did feel threatened. She was running through a suburban area, but there weren't that many other people out on the streets, and this female cop is offering to help her, but there was something that just like she just knew something wasn't right about the situation. Like, why would this police officer be driving this like very old, bad car? And so she asked the police officer for identification, and the woman showed this like very clearly fake badge. And so then my friend got really creeped out, because it became clear that the man following her and this woman were operating as a team. So like the guy following her originally on his bike served to scare my friend, and then the police officer came when she was like her most vulnerable. So anyway, I know this is kind of a dark place to go, but I just, you know, people operate in teams. I think often it is like a man and woman team, because the woman seems less threatening and victims are maybe less on guard than if it was a man following them. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to scare people, but I just think be aware. Be aware of your surroundings. Human trafficking in the US is a thing, and we should be aware of it, we should be preventing it, and we should be helping end it. So I think it's important to share these kind of stories. And that is sketchy. And I hope those people from the story time that I just did, I hope they're in jail. And I hope all those women in the back of the van are safe now. Anyway, this went more of a dark route than maybe it should have. Yeah, so as like a lot of you have been sharing stories, I'm going to keep doing this. I think it's super cool how many stories you guys have, and that you want them to be shared. I mean, I love stories. I'm very unique. So it's making me super excited that I get to share them on your guys' behalf, and that you guys want me to. I think that's awesome. A lot of them are scary, and I think that's great. We love a scary story, obviously. But if you guys have any embarrassing or funny ones, that's also great. And sometimes we need some comedic relief. I farted on a guy's lap once. I did a story time about that. Am I still embarrassed? Yes. Do I see this guy around? Yes. Has he seen the TikTok? Maybe. Maybe. And I did see him the other day and, ugh, gosh, I can't even think about it. It's cringe. But hey, it happens to all of us, right? I did a little pink makeup today. Can you see? That was, got a new palette, Stop and Shop, baby. Balling on a budget. No. Okay. Anyway, yeah, each story I'm going to do a little debrief. Obviously, that was kind of a darker debrief than. This story was submitted to me by a follower who would like to remain anonymous. When I was 14, I had a best friend named Lucy, and we had one of those friendships where we were really close really quickly, which I now know is a red flag and usually a sign of a toxic friendship, but I was too young to know this then. Our favorite thing to do together was hang out at the mall. Our parents would let us go alone as long as we abided to one rule. We had to stay together at all times, and we were always pretty good about that. One night we were having a sleepover at Lucy's house and her Uncle Mike came over for dinner. Uncle Mike was pretty loud and goofy. He showed us like 8 magic tricks that night. I liked him, he was fun, but as I was helping clear dishes after dinner, I overheard Mike and Lucy's mom having a hushed conversation in the kitchen. She was like, "You've had too much to drink, why don't you just spend the night?" So Mike ended up sleeping over that night too. Right before going to sleep, Lucy's mom came into the bedroom, and she told us to remember to shut the bedroom door before falling asleep. When I asked Lucy why she said that, Lucy just shrugged and said, "I don't know." But we made sure the bedroom door was shut just like she asked. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the feeling of someone tickling my feet. So I was having a sleepover at Lucy's house and I woke up in the middle of the night to someone or something tickling my feet. I scream and then I hear shuffling. Lucy wakes up and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I tell her that something was tickling my feet, but she doesn't believe me. I'm like, "Well, why is the door open? We shut it before we went to sleep." And she goes, "Relax. Sometimes it happens because there's a draft in the house." And I tell her that I think it was her uncle who was tickling my feet and she goes, "Oh, come on, you're hallucinating." And honestly, at the time I had a bad feeling about Lucy's reaction. It felt like she was gaslighting me and I had no idea why. A few weekends later, Lucy and I are chilling at the mall on a Saturday afternoon. My parents let us go to the mall together alone, but their one rule is that we have to stay together the whole time. They call it the buddy system. So that day, Lucy's acting weird. She keeps looking around nervously and checking her phone. She says she has to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll go with you." Because we always go together, even if the other person didn't have to pee. And Lucy's like, "No, I'll go alone. I'll be quick." And I'm like, "No, I'll just go with you." And she snaps really aggressively, and she's like, "Just stay here." And then she spins around and sprints away from me. So Lucy's running away from me in the mall. I sprint after her. She's super fast. She rounds a corner, and then I can't find her after that. I start crying. I have no idea why my best friend ran away from me. So I sit down on a bench in the mall. I'm still crying, really overwhelmed. Then I hear someone say my name. So I look up and it's Lucy's uncle, Uncle Mike. He asks what's wrong and I tell him. He's being super nice and comforting. And then he starts rubbing my back, which made me uncomfortable, but I don't say anything. Then he offers to give me a ride home. And I say, "No, I can just call my parents." And he goes, "Just let me give you a ride, come on." But the way he said it the second time gave me goosebumps. It was aggressive. Like he wasn't asking me, he was telling me. So I stand up and step away from him and say, "You're making me uncomfortable, I'm calling my parents." Mike glares at me, and then he says, "No one likes a tease," and he walks away. I told my parents what happened, and they immediately called Lucy's parents. Apparently, Uncle Mike had taken a liking to me, and he found out that I was going to be at the mall that day with Lucy, and Mike paid her $100 to run away and leave me alone with him. He told Lucy that I liked him too, and that she was being a good friend by giving us alone time. I never spoke to Lucy again after that. There's this lighthouse that you can see from my house, and my mom used to tell me a story about a woman who used to live there. No one lives in it now, but there used to be this young woman in her 20s who lived there like 30 years ago. Apparently she came from a really broken home. Her mom and sister died in a horrible car crash, and her dad was an abusive drug addict. So the harbor master let her live in the lighthouse and paid her a small salary for taking care of it. So she had been living there for a couple months, and that's when she noticed weird things starting to happen. Some of her belongings would occasionally go missing. Like one time she couldn't find her flashlight and she looked for it everywhere. And finally she found it under her bed, which was weird because she knew she had never put it there. But then weirder stuff started to happen. So at this point she had been living at the lighthouse for like 6 months, and she was getting pretty creeped out because bizarre things started happening. She started noticing that some of her food was going missing, but she was the only person who lived in the lighthouse, obviously, and she was really specific about what food she bought when she went grocery shopping. She went to the grocery store at the beginning of each week, and for example, she would always buy 7 apples, one for each day of the week. And she was always really precise about that. But there were a few Sundays where she didn't have any apples left by the end of the week, which didn't make any sense because she always counted at the grocery store to make sure she had 7 apples. So she started getting more and more creeped out, but she didn't want to say anything because she had nowhere else to live. And then one night she woke up in the middle of the night to something touching her feet at the end of her bed. So she woke up in the middle of the night to something tickling her feet, and she was really freaked out, obviously. So she jumped out of bed and turned all the lights in the lighthouse on. But when the lights came on, there was nothing there. She checked through the whole lighthouse and couldn't find anything. Nothing like that ever happened again, but she never slept well after that. She stayed in the lighthouse for like 5 more months. months. But eventually she found a new place to live, got a new job. She ended up moving to an entirely different state. And then one day, like a year later, she's at work, sitting at her desk, and she's going through old pictures on her phone. And she finds an album on her phone called You at Night. And she's thinking, what? I do not remember making this album. So she clicks into it and she gasps because all the pictures in the album are of her sleeping in her old bed at the lighthouse. Okay, this is a true story. My mom studied abroad in London with two of her friends her sophomore year of college. So when they arrived in London, they found this great apartment. The landlord was this woman named Eve, and she lived in the apartment below. And they were happy about the fact that she was a woman because they didn't have to worry about dealing with some sketchy male landlord. But Eve turned out to be a little sketchy herself. First of all, she always seems nervous when she was talking to them. She also had this pattern of like disappearing for a few weeks, and when she got back, she would never really tell them where she was. She'd just be like, yeah, I was on vacation. And the other bizarre thing about Eve was that even though she lived in London and it's foggy there most of the time, she always had an amazing tan. And the girls realized it was because she had a tanning bed inside of her apartment, and when she was home every night she would tan, and the girls could see the blue fluorescent light glowing from her window. So it's the middle of the semester and they hadn't seen Eve for like 3 weeks, and my mom comes home from class one day and the door to their apartment is slightly open, and my mom hears someone inside. So she comes in quietly, and inside is Eve using their phone. And before Eve sees my mom there, she goes, "And what did you do with the bodies?" So she sees my mom, she immediately hangs up. She gets really weird. She's like, gotta go, bye, and leaves their apartment, doesn't explain why she was in there using their phone. Also talking about dead bodies. So Eve skedaddles, and my mom's like, okay, that was weird, but like maybe I misheard her. Okay, so fast forward 5 years, my mom's out of college, she's in her apartment, she's living in Boston, Massachusetts, she's eating pizza with her boyfriend at the time, who's now my dad. And they turn on the TV and they decide to watch the hit TV series, America's Most Wanted. And the episode is about this woman who conducted a series of robberies and murders along the East Coast of the United States. She targeted like really wealthy areas in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut. And at the end of the America's Most Wanted episode, they show a sketch of what the person looks like based on witnesses' descriptions.
Story time about how my blind date hid in my closet for 8 hours. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I'm in my late 20s and I've been looking for a boyfriend for years now. I started using dating apps, but none of that worked. Recently, my boyfriend started dating this really cool guy. He told me he had a really good friend and that he thought they should set me up. Of course, I had never met this guy before. I didn't know if he had social media. I didn't know anything about him. My sister and her boyfriend set up the whole thing. Oh yeah, and my sister told me that he was a doctor, he owned a boat, and loved golfing. So I got ready for the date and I showed up to the restaurant. Right away, he comes over and says hi to me. He knew that I would be wearing a pink shirt. We sat down to eat and we basically stood at the restaurant for 3 hours just talking and having fun. We talked about a bunch of stuff, and towards the end of the date, he gave me a kiss and asked me out again. I said yes. We said goodbye and I went home. Then I decided to go get ice cream and I went back home. I watched some TV, went to sleep. The next morning, I'm getting ready. I open my closet door and he jumps out. Part 2 is this guy had been hiding in my closet for 8 hours watching me sleep and change. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Ran into my living room and I asked him what he was doing. He said that he really liked me and that he just wanted to spend some time with me and he didn't know how to tell me, so he decided to come over to my place when I went to the supermarket the night before. I asked him how he got in and he said he came in through a window. I looked at my window and it was wide open. Remember I said I went to the supermarket in part 1? That's when he decided to come into my apartment. By the way, at this point I had just finished showering and I was in my towel. My knees started shaking and I was so scared. I asked him why he hid in my closet for 8 hours. He said it wasn't a big deal and that he thought I wouldn't see him. Then he actually said that he was excited for our second date. He started walking toward me and I told him to stay away. But then he started getting really angry. So I decided to play it off and act like everything was cool just so that I could get out of my apartment safely. I stayed with him in my apartment for 2 hours. Then I pretended I wanted to go get breakfast together. But then he lunged at me and tried to kiss me. Part 3, he lunges at me and tries to kiss me. I pushed him away, but then he tried again. I ran to the door, unlocked it, and ran to my neighbor's house. I could feel him right behind me the whole time. He was asking me to calm down while I was running away. Did he actually think I was gonna be flattered that he was hiding in my closet for 8 hours while I slept? Luckily, my neighbor opened the door right away. He let me in, but my blind date tried to pretend that we were together and that we had just gotten into a fight. My neighbor knew better because he knew my situation. He locked the door and then we called the cops. It turns out he went to the same gym I did. My sister's boyfriend goes to the same gym. So he asked my sister's boyfriend to set us up, even though they actually didn't know each other. The cops looked for him but couldn't find him. I haven't seen him since. Story time about how my entire family found out I had an OnlyFans. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My family is super strict on me. My dad was so strict. I couldn't even have girlfriends growing up. Like, I couldn't have kids over. I couldn't go to anyone's house. It was the worst. Daddy dearest would even check my emails and my cell phone every single day. So when I turned 18, I moved the heck out of that house. So of course I needed to earn money, and I found out that one of my friends had an OnlyFans and she was trying to convince me to use it so that I could sign up with her link. Part of me just wanted to really piss off my dad, so I signed up. And guess what? Within a week, I had about 60 followers charging $9 a month. You do the math. See, my dad was paying for my phone bill and everything at the time, so I wanted to become financially independent, and I was able to do it. So I tell my dad I don't need his financial help anymore, and he starts asking questions. But I wasn't giving him any information. Later on that night, my phone starts acting weird. Go to part 2. That's when I realized that my phone had been hacked. Guess what? It was Daddy Dearest. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Before I realized my dad had hacked my phone, he called me and asked me to come over. But he had a really bad attitude, so I was like, what the heck is going on? When I get to my parents' house, both my parents are sitting on the couch waiting for me. And that's when my dad tells me that he knows that I'm on OnlyFans. He tells me I'm a whore and that I'm a slut, and that I've disgraced the entire family. My mom just stayed quiet the entire time, but I definitely kept my cool. Once my dad was finished insulting me, I calmly told him that I was an adult and that he had no right to intervene into my life. I asked him how he found out, and then he showed me his cell phone. He somehow had access to everything in my phone. I was so disgusted. That's when my mom gets up from the couch, gives me a hug, and tells me that she's proud of me. She said she didn't agree with me having OnlyFans, but that she was happy I was turning into an adult. Then the craziest thing happens. The doorbell rings, and guess who it is? Part 3 is up. When I open the door, it's my aunt, my uncle, and my cousins. My father literally called the entire family because I had an OnlyFans. As soon as my aunt sees me, she bursts into tears. I ran away from my parents' house and went straight to my apartment. Then my cousin told me they were planning on having an intervention. Now I'm making $5,000 on OnlyFans. XOXO, OnlyFans. Story time of how I almost got arrested for selling my mom's underwear. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My mom is a total MILF. She used to be a video vixen back in the early 2000s. She even used to model and had a huge following. By the way, yes, I am her son. She's in her late 30s now, but she's still banging. So I basically found a way to monetize her hotness. The idea came to me one day when I was looking on the internet on how to make money online. Well, I found a bunch of articles about how people sell their foot pictures for money. This totally blew my mind, and I thought I can definitely do that with my mom's feet. So I started out by taking pictures of my mom's feet, but she wasn't having it, and she even got suspicious and asked me why I was doing that, so I basically had to stop that. Then I found an article about women selling their underwear. I knew this was what I needed to do. My mom had her fair share of underwear, so I thought she's not gonna notice if you go missing. What I'm about to say is really gross. Yes, I started stealing my mom's dirty underwear and selling them online. I sold the first pair for $50. After that, I started stealing my mom's underwear all the time. So I started stealing my mom's underwear to sell them online. So basically, I started keeping track of every single time my mom went to shower. After she was done showering, I would make sure to go and steal her underwear, her dirty underwear. Then I would take a peek into her laundry basket and grab whatever was there too. In just the first month of selling my mom's underwear, I had made $500. So I started selling even more underwear. And I started selling them for $75 a pop. And this is gross, but some guys wanted my mom's underwear after she went to the gym. Totally disgusting, but those are the ones that I could really sell for more money. One day my mom started getting really suspicious, asking me where I got the money to buy all the stuff that I was getting. And of course she started freaking out because she noticed a lot of her underwear started going missing. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Well, I didn't know this, but my mom had installed cameras because she was getting really nervous that she had a stalker. So I would go on about my day stealing my mom's underwear. Little did I know I was being filmed every second of the day. There's a knock on the door one day and it's the police. Part 3. One day there's a knock on the door and it's the police. They told me they had a warrant to search my house. I called my mom and she came home right away. That's when she broke it to me and told me that she had installed cameras and that she caught someone in the camera stealing her underwear. I couldn't believe they hadn't figured out it was me. Then she shows me the camera recordings in front of the police. And you can totally tell it's me in the video stealing my mom's underwear and putting it in Ziploc bags. And then I would just send it off to these nasty dudes. That's when the cops told me they were gonna arrest me. My mom begged them not to and explained to them that it was probably just a phase I was going through. I basically stayed quiet the whole time because I was not about to incriminate myself. The cops leave and my mom turns to me and starts laughing. She confesses that she set up the whole thing because she knew the whole time it was me stealing her underwear. When I told her how much money I'd made, she said we should keep going with the business. So yeah, we're still in business and we're going strong. My mom's story time about how my ex caught me cheating on him. My ex was the biggest player in my college. All the girls knew him and everyone warned me not to hang out with him. Of course I didn't listen. He asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes, of course. We had been going out for a few months, but every time he would go to a frat party, I would hear from someone else that he had been cheating on me or that he was trying to hook up with other girls. And I would ask him about it. He would absolutely deny it and say that people were just trying to separate us because they were envious of our relationship. I believed him a little bit, but something told me I shouldn't. So of course I decided to check his messages, and guess what? I found a bunch of messages between him and girls that he went to class with. I confronted him and he denied everything. He said those were not his messages and that I was probably making things up. He deleted the messages before I could take screenshots. It was around the time of my birthday and I was planning a party, and I told him he couldn't come to my party because I was upset at him. I made sure to invite a friend of his to my party who I knew had a crush on me. So his friend and I got really cozy at my party. We started hanging out every single day after coming. Part 2. So my cheating boyfriend didn't show up to my birthday party. Instead, I invited one of his friends who I knew had a crush on me. Let's call him Bob. Well, Bob and I started hanging out all the time. Behind my boyfriend's back, of course. My boyfriend and I would hang out less and less. Well, Bob started catching feelings and he asked me to break up with my boyfriend and to basically come clean to him, and I said no. I had no intention of leaving my boyfriend. I just wanted to get revenge. And honestly, it felt really good to do that. Bob got really upset because I didn't want to break up with my boyfriend and he went off. I started hearing rumors around the school about me hooking up with Bob. My boyfriend asked me about it and I said, I don't know where that's coming from. I haven't hooked up with anyone. My boyfriend didn't believe me. My boyfriend went to a party that night and he didn't invite me, which of course, you know what that means. I asked Bob if we could hang out, so I went over to his place. We're on his couch kissing and my boyfriend comes in through the door. Part 3. So while I'm hooking up with Bob on his couch, my boyfriend walks in through the door. Bob got up from the couch and went and stood next to my boyfriend. And my boyfriend just begins to say, I knew that you were cheating on me. You see, I knew it. Rumors were true. And I said, well, you've been cheating on me for months since we started dating. Then Bob pipes up and says, look, I'm sorry I did this to you, but it had to be done. I slowly started to realize that I had been set up by both of them. I went back to my dorm and I didn't speak to them for a few days. My boyfriend was calling and begging me to get back with him. He said he would forgive me for the cheating if I forgave him for cheating on me. But Bob was also messaging me asking me to be his girlfriend. He said he'd never cheat on me like my boyfriend did and that he really had feelings for me. Well, I didn't get back with my boyfriend, but we're hooking up. And I'm still hooking up with Bob too, but I made a promise that he wouldn't tell my ex. I did find out that my ex cheated on me with 15 girls. And that's on toxic.
My niece Jenny went through trauma as a kid and ended up becoming an emotional eater, obese, held back a grade, and socially stunned. Her parents, with a lot of pushing, put her into therapy and she was able to heal from the trauma and gain control of her eating. Because they waited so long to take the problem seriously, after she lost the weight, her skin didn't bounce back and she was left with a saggy belly. She had a double roll belly where there's a roll above and below the navel, and the bottom one tends to stick out in clothing. Nothing she did would fix it. Her parents are very much anti-plastic surgery, and given that she was a teenager, I totally get it, but she was miserable in her body. Jenny stays with me during the summers because I live near a beach and I love spending time with her. Over the years, she would cry and cry to me about how much she hated her stomach and how she just wishes she could look normal and her parents would not let her get a tummy tuck. Last year, I decided that I would give her the tummy tuck for her 18th birthday as long as she cleared it with her counselor. The counselor agreed that this was something that would truly help. She had done it late in the summer, healed while staying with me, and then went to college. I can't begin to tell you the kind of different person she became. Confident, happy, she finally wore clothes that didn't hide her body and the whole 9 yards. She came home from spring break and finally wore something that made her mom take notice, and I'm guessing mom saw the scar. She hit the roof and started yelling at Jenny for what she did, asking her if she really spent her college money for something this frivolous. Jenny came crying to me about it and I knew I couldn't let her mom blame her, so I fessed up. I am now completely blacklisted. My sister basically thinks I'm Satan, warping her kids' self-esteem and self-image. I should have told her to learn to love her body instead of giving into diet culture. Jenny is healthier and happier than she's ever been before. Furthermore, she was 18 and this is something she has wanted since she was about 15. It didn't lead her to wanting more surgeries. It led her to sobbing happy tears after she tried on a curve-fitting dress for the first time. I don't see what I did was wrong at all. At the same time, I know she's not my kid and we went behind my sister's back. Plastic surgery is a big deal, so I don't know. My cousin Millie is 30 years old and is an ER nurse. Her birthday was a few days ago and we planned a birthday prank, which was leaving a fake snake on her cake. All fun and games because we do this every year to every family member. Well, apparently this year Millie didn't want it, so she was pretty pissed at the fact that we didn't. Now, a few days ago while I was in school, I got a call from Millie during lunch. I thought it would be her saying she's picking me up, but it wasn't. She proceeded to tell me that my mother had passed away in a car accident. My heart dropped and I felt like puking. My mother and I don't have the best relationship, but I still love her. Millie began to tell me the details of the death and what exactly happened to the point I hung up on her and called my mother. My mom, who was supposedly at work as a nurse, didn't pick up and I ended up running to the bathroom. I called my dad, bawling my eyes out and telling him what happened. He didn't understand what I was talking about because he called my mom right before I called. He made me explain everything and understandably he was pissed. He picked me up from school and called my mom in the car just to prove that she was alive and okay. That night my aunt, who's not Millie's mom, called a meeting to her house and we all talked it out. They were all pretty much disgusted with Millie as she tried to justify her choices, but she ended up apologizing. I got up and I stated that I didn't ever want to talk to her again. Now Millie is engaged. Her wedding is coming up soon and I was supposed to be a flower girl. I'm 15, but they wanted me to be a part of it. So now I have pulled out of the wedding, which is what Millie is worried about. She doesn't want people to question where I was and started to yell at me for being petty. My dad took me home and blocked Millie on everything. Her fiance, who I'm very close to, ended up messaging me asking me to come, and I told him no, and what his fiance did was disgusting. He said while what Millie did was wrong for doing it at school, it was just a prank, and I blew up at him. She told me my mother was dead, fucking dead. He sounded genuinely confused and asked me what the hell I was talking about. I told him what happened, and turns out Millie and her mother lied to him and said that Millie just sent a gory picture to me while I was at school. Next thing I knew, he left to go stay with his mother and apologized to me. Now I'm getting blamed for ruining Millie's relationship. I'm not talking to her or her mother, but am I the asshole? For clarification, Millie knew that she was going to get pranked. She has participated in pranks in the past and has never said she hated it. We also asked her close friends and her fiance if the fake snake was okay, which they gave us a yes and that it was fine. A little less than a month ago, I decided to house sit for a family member and her boyfriend for a week while they went to see their parents. I knew I wasn't getting paid for taking care of the house and feeding their pets, but that was okay because I live with my parents and a week away sounded like a dream come true. House sitting went fine and I pretty much forgotten about it until today. The family member sent me a PayPal request with no explanation. She requested $184 and I immediately called her to ask her why she was doing this. She stated it was for my share of the bills for when I stayed at their house. I told her I took a week off of work to care for her house free of charge. She said that I still had to pay utilities. I told her to go fuck herself and hung up. Ever since, she's been messaging me saying she's going to call the police and tell everyone on Facebook about what a horrible piece of shit I am. I haven't responded to any of these messages and don't plan to. But am I missing something? Am I the asshole? Am I wrong for wanting to have my wedding even though my sister lost her baby? A week before my wedding, my sister found out she miscarried at 5 months. Obviously, I was very upset for her as losing a baby can be very tough, especially because it was her first baby. But I didn't want it to end up being more important than my wedding. 3 days before my wedding, my sister announces at a family gathering that she wants my wedding to be canceled and changed to a funeral for her baby. I was so upset that she would even ask this. I had been waiting months for my wedding and her miscarriage happened so soon. She burst into tears in front of our family, saying I could wait a few months for my wedding, but she couldn't delay her baby's funeral. I got so mad I stormed off. My whole family took her side, telling me to cancel my wedding, even though I had arranged and bought everything. Even my dress and venue was ready, so I couldn't just cancel. I ended up cutting off all of my family, and only a few remained to attend my wedding. My sister hasn't spoken to me in years, and neither has my family. In my opinion, if my sister loses a baby, like a week before my wedding, I wouldn't